Well, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where everyone is in the world. These are the ways we have to begin presentations nowadays, because we're never sure where everyone is connected from. So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Franklin Smith, and I'm Executive Director of Isaac. We are thrilled, Isaac that is thrilled to be able to present this evening's webinar in collaboration with our good friends at Control Bionics. It is indeed October 13th, and it is just after 7 p.m. If you're in North America's Eastern time zone. The reason I mention that is because October is AAC Awareness Month. And tonight's webinar is certainly a presentation that is meant to focus awareness on AAC and the field of AAC and the absolutely amazing people who devote their careers to this field. So again, on behalf of Isaac, we want to thank Control Bionics for their tremendous support of Isaac the organization, of Isaac Connect, of our in-person conference, which is scheduled for Cancun next year, July 30th through August 4th, 2022. So thank you very much, Control Bionics. Before I hand it over to this evening's moderator, I just want to let everyone know that this evening's webinar is being recorded, and that recording will be made available on Isaac's website, probably within 24 or so business hours after the conclusion of tonight's live event. We absolutely want to make sure that everyone in attendance this evening has an opportunity to ask questions, make comments. You will notice if you hover your mouse around the Zoom control panel, there is a Q&A button, and you are more than welcome to press that button and type in your questions, comments, positive feedback, because there's only going to be 5 positive feedback tonight, of course. At any time during the presentation, you won't be disturbing the presentation. And I believe our moderator and presenter this evening will be very happy to take and respond to questions on a time allowing basis after the conclusion of the formal part of the presentation. Also, another question that we get very frequently is, can you have, or will you as an attendee have access to the presentation slides for this evening? A PDF version of the presentation slides are posted now on the Isaac website. They will also be dropped into the Zoom chat panel during the presentation, probably a couple of times during the presentation, so you can pick them up through that file sharing functionality within Zoom chat. So I think that covers off all of the technical stuff. I am going to do something that's hard for me to do, and I'm going to shut my mouth now, and I'm going to hand it over to the people who you are really here to see and listen to this evening. So it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Kristen Whitfield. And I could go on and on about Kristen, but I don't want to do that because Kristen doesn't want me to do that. So I'm going to just leave it at, as Kristen is a speech language pathologist who has been privileged to focus on AAC for most of her career. And currently, Kristen is the clinical education specialist at Control Bionics. And what an introduction. So Kristen, thank you very much. Take it away and do your moderating stuff as well as I know you're going to do. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Franklin, and thank you to Isaac for this opportunity to speak with you all tonight. And I have a very small part in this. I am going to be helping to check the Q&A window and also the chat window. If there are questions that I can answer, I will do that. If there are questions that are related to clarification for something that Jill has said, I will break in gently and see if we can get that kind of clarification. If there are things that are wonderful questions, but maybe will require a little bit longer to answer, we might hold those till the end just so that we can make sure to get through the content. But we definitely are open to questions. So if we do not answer them during the session, we can figure out a way to do so in writing or some other format later. So I think it's probably the easiest if you do use the Q&A for any content related questions, anything that you wanted to ask Jill specifically. And then the chat window, if there are any technical issues or anything like that, that might be a good way to separate those out. And I think that's the bulk of my part. So I now get to introduce Jill, and Jill also has asked for a short introduction. Jill is also a speech language pathologist, and she is currently part of the Control Bionics team. And I am happy to be able to work with her on a regular basis and also turn over tonight's session to her right now. So Jill, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kristen. So now comes the hardest part because I am absolutely not tech savvy. I'll just give that intro. I am a speech language pathologist. I've worked in the realm of assistive technology and AAC for many long years now and have been with Control Bionics for 2 years and have loved every one of those roles in my career as a speech pathologist. So now I will try to transition this screen and we'll see if it works. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to start my slideshow. Here we go. There we go. And as Kristen said, we are more than happy to answer questions as we go along. I very much like a back and forth and dynamic kind of situation. So if you hear something and you have questions or thoughts or comments, please feel free to weigh in and ask for clarification. So the name of tonight's presentation is Meet Me Where I Am, and this is ramps to cognitive and physical access of high-tech AAC following acquired brain injury. And I will say this is specific tonight to acquired brain injury. However, much of what we're talking about, I think if you do anything in this realm, you'll see that it's probably relatable. So just an overview, a quick look at what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to do a quick review of brain injury and just kind of the components of brain injury that we're thinking of and looking at. We're going to talk a bit about determining where your client is, because brain injury is a pretty big term and your client could be anywhere on a whole spectrum there. We're going to talk a lot about the discussion of client needs in a variety of areas. And then we're going to talk definitely more in depth in these two areas, and that is in terms of access methods for AAC, as well as motivating therapy ideas. And then we're going to leave you with some resources at the end and would welcome you guys sharing resources back with us. So let's get underway. So under brain injury, obviously, we have a few different categories, and there is the prenatal arena, hypoxic and anoxic events, umbilical cord issues, maternal infections. There's a lot that falls under this category, but that is not what we're discussing tonight. We're going to be over here under acquired. And in terms of acquired brain injury, we have these two kind of distinctions that I've always found kind of odd. We have traumatic and non-traumatic. So over in the realm of traumatic brain injury, we're talking about things like motor vehicle accidents or falls or violence, gunshot wounds, military attack or blast injuries we would see. I think it's an unfortunate terminology, non-traumatic, because I can guarantee you that the individuals and their families would consider stroke, tumor, cancer, and brain inflammation and infection. Those I think feel fairly traumatic to them, but they're classified as non-traumatic. So we are really focused more over in this arena of acquired brain injury tonight. So this is a big list, deficits related to brain injury, and I am not going to read all of these. My point in listing them is to just make us kind of come around to and think about how much is going on with these clients when they have suffered a brain injury. So in terms of physical I want to really draw your attention to things like dizziness and fatigue and headaches and things about reduced muscle strength, motor speed, and programming. Those are all very important when it comes to the realm of AAC. And then in the realm of sensory perceptual, obviously we need to look at what kinds of things are going on with their sensory and perceptual systems. Do we have any changes in their hearing, any changes in their vision? Very important to know they may be in a really different place after that injury. And again, super important when it comes to accessing a communication system. And specifically that we're talking about high-tech communication systems. So very important things like sensitivity to light, very important. And then executive functioning. And truly, truly, almost every bullet point on this page is going to have a huge impact in every area of functioning for these clients, but definitely in terms of engaging with and using an augmentative communication system. And you'll see, I want to just draw your attention to down in the lower right-hand corner, most of these slides are going to be linked so that you can go back to this information. My point is for us to remember how many things are coming to the table when we are working with a client with brain injury. In terms of language, there's a lot going on. I'm sure we all have some interesting stories around the pragmatic and social communication aspects of clients who have had an acquired brain injury. You're going to have a lot going on in terms of maybe not always using things appropriately, knowing how to do things like take turns in conversations. Those kinds of things are going to be something that need to be specifically addressed. And then in terms of spoken language, we often have a really significant impact here, such that we have clients who are no longer able to use speech in any way to actually meet their communication needs. And I do want to point out the fact that that's really who we're focusing on tonight, because we know there's a lot of ranges in terms of brain injury. We have a lot of spontaneous recovery. I am really talking about those late stage recovery clients where they are at a point that it is clear that they're not going to be able to use verbal communication as an option. And very specifically, we're talking about clients who have also had a very significant physical impact, because I think that's what presents the most challenges. They're kind of bringing every area of deficit to the table. So there's a lot to consider and think about. But, when we're thinking about those Rancho levels, we're talking about maybe stages 6 to 10. So later term, because, earlier on, you may be really presenting a whole range of things that's really going to change as the patient recovers. And so these are later stages that we're focusing on right now. So we are looking at impacts in so many areas. So obviously impacts in communication, impacts in cognition, physical impacts, and this last one, a really big one, emotional. So you've not only got the kind of labile affect that can come from brain injuries, we know that's a part of it, but then just this devastating new reality that they're living. And it's a lot to take in. And it's really important because it really has a big impact on the rest of their ability to rehab and success and be successful with a communication system. So Lev Vygotsky, he's probably not somebody that you're very familiar with, as he died in the 1930s. However, I ran across this quote many years ago, and it's so powerful to this day. It's still relevant, and I am going to take the time to read it. He's discussing folks with these significant disabilities and says all contact with people, all situations which define a person's place in the social sphere, his role and fate as a participant in life, all the social functions of daily life are reordered. It cannot be overstated how profound this is for the family, for sure, but for the individual who suffered this injury. It's so significant. And this is an aside, but I don't know, I would reference Ghost Boy. If I'm sure many of you have read that. If you haven't, I would definitely grab that, because this is someone who had not a brain injury, but he had an infection that led to him essentially being in a situation where he was locked in. And what was very much stood out to me about this is this was a typically developing person who had a very bright, happy family life, and how quickly after the loss of his ability to move and make his thoughts known, he kind of lost himself and became a very passive part of his environment. And that's really key when you're talking about these folks with acquired brain injury, because they are living a very different life than what they're used to. And it's very easy to lose your hope and your motivation. So how do we come find those clients where they are? We're talking about meeting where they are. How do we find them? I'm going to pull out an oldie but a goodie. This international classification of functioning has been around for a really long time. It's been out there. I love it. It's this idea of disability not residing within the individual, but more it being a convergence of the individual's strengths and deficits, and how well that environment and context that the person is in either helps or hinders them in their ability to be in that context and successfully perform a role or participate in the context. And I think what stands out to me is that this has been around for a long time. It's been updated, it's been voted on, we're all aware of it. And yet, in the day-to-day, as I get to travel around and meet with teams, and I mean good teams, really impressive, so knowledgeable, but I think this piece gets lost a bit. And I think it's a really important piece is looking at the client and their environment and how do those two work together and how can we make them work together more effectively to make that patient more effective part of his environment. So let's look very specifically at a client. And in this particular situation, I'm just using one of my clients and we're going to work through this and just talk about a few areas in depth. So this client has a TBI along with a spinal cord injury. He was riding his bike and was hit by a car and very devastatingly injured. Didn't think he was going to make it. That's an important point too. Many of our clients in these situations, the family are so much in just the life and death, I've got them aspect. So that makes it hard to focus on these more subtle aspects of their experience. So this client is a spinal cord injury in terms of his body functions and structures. And I think we need to talk about that for a minute. So we've got the client and we've got their impairments, like what exactly is going on with them and their body functions and structures. And then how does that limit the activities that they can do? And how does that restrict their participation in their world? And then all of that is going to be impacted by these environmental factors as well as the personal factors of the client. So let's move through that. This particular client, in terms of his structures and functions, he has no movement below the neck. He has a tracheostomy, he has severe oral motor weakness, and he actually has very little movement in the facial area and does not have good head control. In terms of his activities, he does not have an option for communication. He sometimes can kind of do a very tiny head shake. It is not effective. For the most part, I think he and his wife are both very frustrated. We're very frustrated with kind of the 20 questions and trying to use a yes or a no. He's not able to participate in any sort of self-care activities, and his mobility is significantly limited because he has this spinal cord injury. And that really limits his participation. Very specifically, this client was involved in his church. He had a friend group that he enjoyed hanging out with and weekly family dinners. He also happened to be a business owner, but they were more focused on kind of the social aspect of things. In terms of contextual factors, he has a very supportive wife, but a very worried wife. She is a worried wife, has become kind of a worried mama situation. He has stepkids. They're worried, but they are actually not living locally. His spouse has health issues. That's a big deal. He does have an outpatient home health speech pathologist, but he had no augmentative communication when he came to us. In terms of his personal factors, he really does have good attention, though he fatigues quite a bit and fatigues kind of quickly. But when he is rested, he has good attention. And I've written here that his cognition is largely intact. And I will say that he understands things pretty well. He does need you to talk a little slowly. He sometimes needs repetition or a bit more description of things. He is certainly not functioning as he was prior to the brain injury, but he has a lot of good skills in there. But key here is he is very frustrated, very depressed, and extraordinarily unmotivated because of that. So we're going to walk through that. And looking at the barriers to communication, there's a lot going on. And honestly, these are just alphabetical. There's no hierarchy here at all, but all of these things are playing a role in terms of his barriers to communication, therefore his barriers to participation in his world. And so this is a really important piece. Kind of had those listed all nice and kind of from top to bottom. But the truth of the matter is, as you all know, that each of these impacts each other. And frankly, it's not even as clear as this nice little circle, because you could really make those arrows go back and forth in all directions and across the circle. But if you think about that, if he doesn't have physical access to a communication system, then he doesn't have communication. We don't know where his language is. He kind of can't regain language and he's not having an opportunity to use it. That's really going to impact his communication partner. It's going to make him be more socially isolated, which of course impacts his emotional state, which impacts his physical access. And so, like I said, you could really make those arrows kind of point every direction. There's a big swirling mess going on there for this gentleman. So how do we get to him? What is our way in? Which one of those things can we focus on to help him? And so how are we going to meet him where he is? This may sound crazy. I'm going to take a minute to talk about our ramp. I mean, it is like this, right? I hope you can see me. I actually don't know what you can see, but we're starting small and we're going to grow from there. So we're starting at the bottom and we're going to help get him where he needs to go. So when we're talking about physical disability, I think we've got that. It's not ideal, but for this gentleman, he does have in-home support to help him with his personal care needs, but his wife does it. And they also have caregivers that come in and give her some relief time. He does have a wheelchair that's well fitted. It's appropriate for him. They actually have an accessible transportation that he can use. He can get there with his wheelchair and go to church and outings with friends. And when he gets out in that wheelchair, in that van, out in the environment, we see these things all the time. They're ubiquitous. We're used to them. We see things like ramps into facilities. We see things like public transportation that has accessible options for people in wheelchairs. We see our push to open. Those kinds of things are out in our environment. It's not perfect. I know that. I had an ankle injury. I saw just in that amount of time, it's not perfect, but it's there. It's something that we're thinking of. In terms of AAC, I think we're headed in the right direction. I say AAC has hit the big time. Just in the time I've been in the field, I think we've gone from truly people, unless you were privileged enough to be in certain areas with certain practitioners, you then had an awareness and knowledge of AAC. But I think a lot of us were kind of left out of that. I think even here in America, American Speech and Hearing Association is really aware that, speech language pathologist training programs are not necessarily covering AAC in the way that they should. It's something they're trying to take on and help us with, but we know that this has been an area that's lacking. I say we've hit the big time because I do think it's on people's radars these days. It is something people are aware of for the most part. We have podcasts, for heaven's sake, like more than one, and they're really good. So it is something that is much more a part of the conversation out there. But I know I love the fact that I get to travel and work with teams across different states. And I know that even within a particular region, there's just a really large continuum in terms of how aware, knowledgeable, comfortable these teams are with augmented communication. So something to be aware of. Still yet, we've hit the big time. People are aware, but there's a lot of ground to be covered. And so let's think about that. This is part of the reason people, if they haven't had enough experience with AAC, these are a few of the considerations that we're going to look at. So if we think back to my gentleman and I'm looking at him, am I going to choose symbols or text or a combination of those? Am I going to do a grid display or visual scene display or some combination of that, low tech or high tech? I would just like to say here, I don't think low tech or high tech needs to be both. You always need both. Please always have both. Dynamic or static display really depends on your client. Portability, durability. And those were like a quick brainstorm. You know that there's a lot more to consider. A simple Google search of feature matching will take you into an amazing vortex of resources. There's so many great tools out there. And it's incredible, but I think also overwhelming. And it's something I'd like to point out because I've noticed that some of the teams that I work with, there are all these resources out there, but it's almost like there's too many resources. And when there's too much of something, I think people feel very shut down. They don't know which one to choose. So I think helping teams with that who are less familiar, there's so many resources to offer, but these are so key to a successful experience for the client, really knowing where they are, knowing what their needs are, and making sure that the system you choose is going to meet them where they are. So these kinds of tools can help you do that. And I'm going to take a minute here to just touch on a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart. As I said, I've been doing AAC and assistive technology for some long years, and I was so devastated to find out about the numbers on abandonment. I won't quote them here. There's a range, but they're not great. And when it's what you think about, live, breathe, eat, drink, sleep, it's all you do, it is discouraging sometimes to hear how frequently communication systems are abandoned. And again, this is an ASHA website. It is linked. And I would really encourage you to check that out, because I think if you will look at these issues that are a part of abandonment, I think that if you can think of that ahead of time and address them and think of them as you move through this process of determining where your client is, feature matching, and making these decisions about a communication system, you are likely to avoid those abandonment issues. There's a lot here, but I want to just touch on a few of them. That first one, that it serves the communication needs and that it can be updated, right? Nobody stays where they are. Nobody is static. So can that system change with them over time? The collaboration, oh my gosh, so key. We need to be sure that the user and the family, they need to have a really big role in this. And I can't say enough about this, because we as professionals may have a wealth of knowledge about the systems that are out there, but those families are the experts on their lives and their family member, and the user themselves, obviously the biggest experts. We need to hear their voices, because even if what I think could work great, if that family does not feel like they've been heard and their concerns have not been addressed, the system is not going to work. Very important that we listen to them. And also that there's an ongoing training, right? We need ongoing support. It's not a one and done situation ever. No matter how thorough your initial look was, it is just an ongoing assessment of the person, their environment, their needs. And so you need to make sure that what you're choosing is flexible and accessible for them. So back to ASH again, it is linked again. They have a lot of great information on their website. And I am not going to read this to you, but I will draw you again. We're going to see this over and over again because it is so important. So the second line of the second paragraph, a well-designed AAC system is flexible and adaptable, and it allows for changes to vocabulary as well as modes of access as language and physical needs change over time. Can't say enough about that. So even though I said these are late stage and we've determined that this is someone who is always going to need augmentative communication, it won't necessarily look the same the first year that they get it, as it will the third year and the fifth year. What they need and how they can access it may change at the time. And so we need to make sure that what we're choosing can adapt with them. So at the very, very least, we need an AAC system that should provide SNUG. I think we all know what that is, spontaneous novel utterance generation. We need to have some phrase-based communication options in there, because I need a way to say those things I say every day quickly and easily. Some of our clients may really kind of hang out in that area. And the ability to retell stories. I will tell you, I am from the Southeast. We are a storytelling people here, but I don't think that's just us. I think if you think about, if you look back over your week or your month and you look at the kinds of things you shared, I'll bet you there are stories that you have retold, either some crazy thing that just all happened at Walmart, or it happened in traffic, or some crazy COVID story you heard, you're retelling it. That's going to be really key, because that's a genuine way to communicate with folks. And we also have those special events that happen, maybe some incredible concert or trip or something that happened that you would retell stories about over time. So an ability to retell stories, I think, is an important piece. So let's go back and look at my gentleman. And I'm going to start right here, because as I said, I really want to focus on the access to high-tech AAC, as well as motivating him. So we've got no movement. We have no movement below the neck, and truly we have very little movement above the neck. And so we have got some limitations. So I'm going to move over here, and I will just tell you, for our client, touch was simply not an option for him. So I'm going to go ahead and look at scan, and you are probably familiar in terms of low tech. We've got all kinds of incredible partner assisted scanning resources. And this is just one of them, depending on the cognition of your client with a brain injury. This may be absolutely not an option and not accessible, because they may not be spelling yet. But in this particular situation, we're going to move through the AEIOU. When I get down that column, as I move through it, I'm going to get some sort of signal from my client to tell me that, yes, I am on the row that he wants. And then when he chooses his row, I will move horizontally through the options. So we're just going to take a quick look at how that looks, just to remember how a low-tech version of that
now,
is.
let's watch this pair use the partner-assisted scanning.
And I'm going to make sure, can you hear that, Kristen?
It's very quiet. I can hear it, but it's quiet.
It is very quiet for me as well. I think it may just be quiet, so I may kind of tell you what's going on. So this client is spelling go out, and obviously it's just a demonstration. Her communication partner is moving through AEIOU. You'll see the person representing the client give a hard blink to indicate, yes, that's where they want to go. And now this person is moving through the letter choices again. So she's going down the column and then over. So now let's take a look and see what that looks like in terms of high tech. This person is using an EMG switch called the NeuroNode, and he actually has this on his wrist. He is scanning as well. This is not the greatest quality video, and I apologize for that, but he will do an initial activation, and you will see the system begin to scan and highlight his options in yellow. And it's going in a row column format, so it will move down the screen. When it gets to what he wants, he activates, and it will move across the screen to his choices. He's using a QWERTY keyboard. He is a literate user who truly prefers to spell out words. So let's have a look at that. You hear the beep to indicate that he activated this switch. And it's moving across the screen. So that is an EMG switch that's requiring very little movement for him, and that's scanning. So I'm going to talk for just a minute the difference there. They're both super functional, and you may have a need for both in different situations. That's one of the things that we're doing, is looking at what are all the contexts that our person in which they're communicating and what's most appropriate for that context, and training the family and training the user about that is really important. But what's nice on the high-tech side of things is that there is some autonomy there. He's able to get these messages out on his own. He's got some other options there. He's got a voice output. So lots of ways that he can use this that would be harder if it was low tech. I also want to point out just a little aside here, he's using a keyboard, and it's something that in the literature, I think you'll run across sometimes, even though there are some rate enhancement features that are really incredible on these devices. A lot of folks will want to stick to spelling, even if they know it's slower. They may eschew those rate enhancement techniques for whatever reason. And this is one of those that can be hard when you can see how things could be faster for them if they were willing to use some things like word prediction or pre-programmed phrases for those things they say all the time. But if that user wants to use the device that way, then that's what we have to value their decision and go with what they want. So now we're going to look at low-tech eye gaze. This is an E-Tran board. Again, just one of the many great options out there. I'm sure you're familiar with this. This is where I'm going to look first at the group that has the letter that I want. I will look next at the color of the letter in that group. So let's see what that looks like. And I do love this video because it is a real life situation. Kid running through the background with a balloon. That's how home therapy is. So he's chosen the lower left-hand group, and he chose purple. So she knows that's M. There goes our balloon carrier. And then he has chosen Y and space. And this is going to show you that the SLP is looking through this clear board, and so she can see where he's looking. And these, I should point out, both these are all on YouTube, and they are cited down below if you want to check those out. So in terms of high tech, this is how it can look. In this particular situation, this is eye gaze, but this person is using her eyes to move around the screen, and then an activation of the EMG switch with her cheek. So you'll see her move around with her eyes. When she gets to what she wants, she's doing a cheek lift that looks like a smile, and that activates what she has highlighted. So let's look at that.
Hi. How are you doing? What have you been up to? Good to see you. When will I see you again? Goodbye.
Okay, so she was using phrase-based options there, but as you can see, again, just a sense of autonomy that comes from that. I'm going to take just a minute. That is, so as Franklin said, we are with Control Bionics, and this is our device. I just want to say that this is a great time to need a high-tech device because there are so many good choices out there. So many great features, so many robust devices, robust communication systems. And this is just one of the many great options out there. I'm going to highlight this one because it's one that I know a lot about. And just also to plant in your brains the fact that if there is a communication challenge, there is probably a solution out there for it. So this is one of them. So this device has 3 access methods in one. It's actually 4 because you can use it as a touch screen device or with a head selection. But in this situation, of course, we're talking about people with more significant physical disabilities. So you can use this device as a traditional eye gaze device. So you can move around your screen with your eyes. And then when you want to activate something, you could dwell or blink to activate. You can use it with scanning, like you saw the one gentleman doing. And you can use what we call the trilogy combination, which is what you just saw, where we use our eyes to move around the screen, but nothing will activate until we make an intentional activation of the EMG switch. And that EMG switch is one of the options out there. There are many options for people who have really significant physical disabilities. We're so lucky to have things like this that we can really tailor to the person. So this is key. You need to figure out where your communicator is, right? Where are they and how do we build the ramps to them? So we're not going to ask the communication or the AAC user to come meet our device. We're going to set up our device to meet where they are, what they're doing. So I'm going to use that EMG switch and I'm going to use my control panel to see what is the movement? What does it look like? Because sometimes we really can't visually see the movement our clients are doing. It may be very tiny, but as they attempt to make a movement, even if you can't see it with your eyes, the brain is still sending an impulse to that muscle that can be picked up by that EMG sensor. So the EMG sensor is quite sensitive. And that's a really important piece because sometimes there are roads in, even for those people that you would not think. So we've got lots of ways to get to that. And I'm just going to throw this up there quickly. This would be a whole separate presentation because there's a lot in the device, but we've got loads of different placement options. We have people who use electrodes above the eyes. We have people who just simply wear it and maybe hold it in their palm and can just do a tiny little movement. So we've got ways in, even if we don't have any visible physical movement. So because of that, because of the kinds of devices that are out there right now, we've got a smiley face over body functions and systems because in this day and age, we do have a way in for almost every kind of client. So in this particular situation, I will tell you that my client has, he has strabismus and he gets, his eyes bother him a lot. He can use eye gaze, but he can use it only for a pretty short time before it begins to give him a headache. So he actually uses scanning. He kind of uses a combination of the two videos you saw. So he has got a placement on his cheek and he does just a tiny movement, not as much as you saw the girl doing in that video, but he does just a tiny movement of his cheek that begins his activation, and then a secondary movement makes his choice for him. So now we're going to head down here. Here's that other area that I said we're going to focus on because this is key. He does have that good attention. He's got, some good cognitive aspects, but frustration, depression, lack of motivation, they're huge. So back to our circle, the thing that can impact absolutely everything in this circle is motivation. Because if it's not there, you are likely not going to be seeing what you hope to see in any of those other areas. Of course, in our field of AT, you've got the quiet indicator, the quiet quality indicators of AT. So what is the one thing we can hit that would have the biggest residual impact on everything else? And so motivation falls very much, it's at the top of the list for me, because if I don't have that, we're probably not going anywhere else. And now we come to what I think is fundamental for all of AAC. Communication, the whole point of it is connection. I think we get very stuck on wants and needs, and they're important. We need those. They're super important. But why do any of us do what we do? Like, why do we move our tongues around and make air come up through our vocal folds to make these sounds and put those sounds together in a certain way to make language? Is to connect. It is to connect with another human being, to share our thoughts, to share our fears, to share our anger, to make a connection. That is the whole point. So what are some things we can do to help them get there? Because sometimes therapy is not as focused on connection. Sometimes it is. It really runs the gamut, but I would encourage you to be really thinking about those things that you yourself would genuinely enjoy. So activities for real connection. These are some of these ideas for therapy. Skyping, FaceTiming, or Zooming with your kids, grandkids, friends, and of course, unfortunately, in the era of COVID, we've all had to do maybe a bit too much of that, but that is a great way in for our clients. Sending text, posting to Twitter or Facebook. So, okay, so that brings me back around to the high-tech aspect of things. This is an advantage. In this day and age, communication means something really, really different. If any of you have teenagers and you find out, how do they first contact somebody? I have a teenager who hates to talk on the phone. I don't know that she's ever, well, very rarely has she used her phone for speaking. It is primarily for Snapchat and for texting. So these other ways, email, texting, Skyping, Snapchatting, all of those things are ways that people are communicating more and more these days. And now I understand that some of the older generation may not be as comfortable with that, but that is a way to connect with their kids and grandkids. And when you have a disability, it is a way to open up the world to you. So that is one of those advantages that a high-tech system is going to have. And again, I'm showing you things from our Trilogy devices because that's what we have lots of knowledge and experience about. But it is a great time to be there. I would say really investigate your communication software because you'd be surprised what your options are. So here, for example, I'm sharing something that one of my clients did, message banking. So I know that you may be thinking an acquired brain injury is not somebody I think of when I'm thinking of message banking. I had someone who had a brother that they used for their message banking because the voice quality was very similar. And that is a way to read your grandkid's favorite story and have that as in your message banking app. As it happens with Ingrid 3 that's on our devices, you can bank messages directly through the device itself. So you can sit just in front of the device and add those in very easily. And then that's a way. So I can Skype with my grandkids and read their favorite story to them, or I can Skype with my grandkid and tell them, you know, remember the time that you did this, or I'm so proud of you. So that's a great way to use the message banking feature. In terms of sending text, you may be thinking, are you kidding? Sending text with somebody with an acquired brain injury? Well, first of all, remember that we're building the ramp so we can start small and we can move them up to more complex things, but there's lots of options. So what if I can at least get here and help my client know that, hey, we can create a text or we can go through and listen to our text being read to us. And then once you get here, this is a little more busy. Again, something very easy to customize. Super easy to customize, so you can make this much more simple. But can I choose a message from here and then choose a person and hit send? I think that's a very reasonable thing to do for our clients. And then I'll tell you what you will see is that response when they get a text back from a grandkid. That's going to be a highly motivating activity. My own mother-in-law does not have this disability, but very much struggles with that. But it was the opportunity to get to hear from her granddaughter that helped her learn what was a very challenging thing for her, which is how to text. Again, today's software on high-tech devices, there's a lot of benefits. So we've got ways into all that social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram. We've got all kinds of ways in there. And if you're, okay, I'm just going to tell you, I am not a social media person. This would not be something I would choose. However, if I were cut off from people in other venues, if it was very difficult for me to get my communication out, Facebook and Twitter and texting allows me the time that I need. And this is something I have seen repeatedly with clients that I work with, well, all the clients that I work with have very significant physical disabilities, and therefore it takes a while to create a message for them. These formats give them time without pressure, without eyes looking at them, to create messages and share them. So they're a great option. And this is just something, again, I'm not going to read it to you, but this was out there, a study that was done just kind of looking at TBI user groups on Twitter. So this is a way to connect. And you can see that they found out that participating in these groups actually had created a lot of hope as they were talking to other people who had suffered similar brain injury, similar events, that they developed a lot of hope from hearing from other people who had been through what they'd been through and were further down the road. So very important way to be able to connect through Twitter.
Bill,
Huge.
before you go on, just
Yeah.
real quick, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome.
That's very helpful. So let the client lead. So important. This is a client who you think about these folks, they have been really relegated to a different position. And some of these people ran businesses and had these very dynamic lives. And now they've been put into a position where they aren't in charge of anything. Let them lead. Let them be in charge of how communication partners are trained. This is really important. It takes longer, but consult with them. Find out from them what is most important to you. Here's 10 things I'd like for us to cover. Does it feel like it covers everything you want it to cover? Is there anything else you want your communication partners to know? Let them have a say so in that. Advocacy work. There are opportunities out there. So these that are underlined are linked. I would encourage you to get out there and just check into what are the options. Let your clients advocate. Let them be in a role of doing something for other people. That is a known treatment for depression, helping other people, and giving them a role again, thinking back to Lev Vygotsky's statement, making them not be relegated to the back. Mentoring younger AAC users, I cannot say how powerful this is. So I'll go back to the things that we see in our environment in terms of ramps and that kind of thing. We really don't see very much out there in terms of communication systems. So having adult users using a communication system connecting with a younger AAC user, that's really powerful and really helpful for that younger user. So a great way for them to become involved and very motivating. Retelling life stories, talking about pictures, create family histories and let the AAC user interview or be the interviewee and use their system to talk through that. These are just a few of the grids that are in grid 3 that would really let you be able to set something up like this for them. This is one example. I know that these are ways you think about using a high-tech device as a memory book. So it can be a kind of a high-tech memory book. You can pull in a lot of those same features that you would have in a memory book right on the high-tech device. Just an example of how you might have something from their past that they're able to talk about using this and spark communication that way. I'm going to have a very quick word about device displays because we don't have much time. Please go read. The device displays make all the difference in the world. And the most recent research that I read essentially said it's very important. It can make or break the communication experience for the AAC user, and more research is needed. That's essentially what the research says. More research is needed, but everything from how and where items are. So this is a visual scene display, for example, and using thumbnails. Even if you know visual scene displays work best, thumbnails are good for my client. Even where you place them can make a difference. So I want to say it's important. Mark that in your brain. Pay attention, try different things for your client. Again, this could be a whole separate presentation. Just notice it, research it, it's important. Okay, and finally, connecting with other AAC users. Again, this is the beauty of social media. It is a way to get out there and join other people who are in your situation, who are encountering the same kinds of things that you are. And this is linked. Go out there. This is just one of the many options. There are many AAC user groups out there. It's a great way to get your person engaged and connected. Start an AAC book group. This is becoming more possible in the era of COVID. It's not great. This is really big, but think about meetups. I think every city is going to have a meetup situation. Well, in America, most of them do, but a way to get out and about with other AAC users, other people who are encountering the same challenges. Very powerful to do that. And then just for fun, create a joke page. They can be dumb jokes. It's still really fun. Using Alexa or Google. For instance, we've got this.
Alexa, what is the weather today?
In Orlando, it's 84 degrees Fahrenheit with clear skies and sun. Today's forecast calls for more of the same, with a high of 87 degrees and a low of 68 degrees.
That's how it always is in Florida. Dog tricks, super fun. Again, engaging in a real way. This is one of my favorites. So that pup has learned to speak when mama uses the communication device. In this situation, again, they're using the EMG switch, but in a spatial mode and being able to just use a tiny tap of their foot. So when we have increased motivation, I think you're going to see those other factors start to shrink. And I'm coming back to communication as connection, because the biggest motivation is genuine connection. Because if that is there, I truly think you're going to see the motivation. And I'm going to take just a second to show us this. And the easiest way for me to do it was just by going out here to the internet. So let me show you. And of course, we're not going to work. Here we go. And I'm going to fast forward this just to make it, because we've got the very end of our program coming up. Okay, here we go.
How was soccer this morning? Did you have fun? How many times did you kick the ball today? Soccer was good. It was fun. I kicked the ball too many times I lost count. Can I have some chips, please, Dad?
Please, Dad.
Yes.
All right, that one gets me every time. I think maybe I'm an age where I just shouldn't watch videos like that. But connection is the whole point. So that piece is very, very important. And I want to say that when we build those rounds, we give them language, we give them access, we give them motivation, then they've got that connection and they'll succeed. And so that's why we're trying to build rounds. And this is a great time for us to stop and ask questions.
So this isn't a question, but one comment, you had talked about AAC kind of discussion groups or user groups. Isaac has a chat group that meets generally every other week online. People from across the world. I know there have been talks about having different ones so that time zones are a little bit easier. That's a fantastic opportunity.
There are so many out there. Thank you for sharing that one, Kristen. Any other questions, comments, ideas? Share your ideas and strategies.
So one other question, and I guess you talk a lot about, the idea of the ramp starting small, starting where they are and then building. I know for some of these folks, because they were used to doing things so differently before, or used to doing more before, it's really hard to start that small. Have you found ways to kind of encourage that participation and that success, even if it is tiny and not really what they want yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to tell you, that's simply never easy, right? There's always going to be dissatisfaction in that realm, and it's unreasonable to think that they're not. So this is why we're trying to find those ways that are reaching around that, right? So it's not going to be, am I doing it at the level I was doing it before, but that when I make that connection, that is so much more meaningful and powerful, that even though I'm not doing everything else, I have made that, and that feels more important to me than anything. So taking into account that user's experience. And the other thing I would point out, we always used to talk about today goals and tomorrow goals, and I will still talk about that with clients. So our today goal is this, but when you achieve this, that is the foundation that's going to allow us to go here. So sharing with them what your vision is for where you're headed, and that we're building that foundation to get there. We're building that ramp to get there. Because oftentimes, I know that a lot of our clients, Kristen, are people who were doing some really amazing and powerful things in their past life. And it may be really hard to accept that they can't move at these incredible speeds and do these incredible things that they did. But if they can see the vision, they are people who knew about working hard and laying that foundation. So if they can see where we're headed, that often is a great way to get them started with accepting a small ramp to start with.
Good. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's true. And you're right. It's not easy, but it's important. And there needs to be a place to start and finding those connections.
I want to just say one other thing about that. I almost included and didn't. I think it's very important for them to have a way to say, you know what, this sucks. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten someone set up. And when I say, we can add messages you want to, how many times the first message may include an attempt at an expletive?
For sure.
Because they're saying this stinks. I don't like this. And it needs to be talked about. Let them voice that. That's a great, we need to be able to say that. I'm not happy with this. I could go faster before and say, you're right, it stinks. But here's where we're starting.
Yeah. Speaking of going faster before, one of our participants says, I've seen a 20-year-old young man who has a TBI from skateboarding. We don't know where he's at. How do you feel about yes and no questions?
I actually feel great about yes and no questions because we need to figure out where they are. Now, the one caveat I would say is if you can't find a clear yes and no, don't assume that that means something. That is my only caveat. But I think it's that very careful, and you'll find often it is maybe the caregiver, the overnight nurse. It is often these people who are kind of hanging out with them, maybe for a different purpose, who will start to notice, oh, you know what I noticed is I noticed this little corner of his mouth that seems to move when we say that. So that careful observation, and really key here is that when you see something, you state it very clearly. So if it is this tiny corner of the mouth that I say, oh, I saw this side of your mouth and touch it. I saw this side of your mouth do this. I think you mean yes. So when you do this, I think it's yes, I'm going to do this, and see if we build from there. But be very clear about what you see that you're identifying as yes, and say it every time so that everybody's on the same page. That's a great question.
And I think oftentimes with yes and no questions, when someone has other ways to communicate, that's when yes, no can become frustrating because you're so far, you're so much in the control of the person who's asking the questions. You don't have that flexibility. But if you're searching for something, then that's a great way to start. Well,
it's often the first step, right? So we may start at yes, no. Another big caveat is that's not our solution. That's not our final solution. That is only always a launching point. And I will bring up a very quick, it was not acquired brain injury, but a child I worked with who used a system, and mom was a phenomenal communication partner. And she really kind of knew the kid well. This kid was only 7, and she would move through this list of questions and typically did a great job. But and she had a good yes, no that they had established. But this kid was agitated, trying to let mom know something. She wasn't able to let her know it. So they went to her system, and mom went through the system. And it turns out that the kiddo had eaten about 45 minutes earlier, but she was really hungry. Mom said, I would have never presented the choice of food, but she was hungry. Maybe she was having a growth spurt, who knows? But mom teared up saying that I would never have offered her that. And so these are why we don't land on yes, no. We only launch from yes, no, if we don't have another way in.
We have another related question. Have you created communication dictionaries that describe the client's different ways to answer yes, no, because it may change if there is fatigue or difference between familiar and unfamiliar partners?
So brilliant. Absolutely. You can call it communication diaries, dictionaries, profiles, passports. They've got all kinds of names. And again, it is a vortex you can enter on Google. There are so many phenomenal resources out there, just templates that you can use to get you thinking about that. But very important for clients like this because it is co-creation, right? It's the communication partner with this individual coming together to create this message. So having a manual for anybody who encounters this communication, this individual, to know if I'm saying yes, I do this. If I'm saying no, I do that. As a matter of fact, right in Grid 3 software, there's some great things that will say, when I'm letting you know this, I will activate this sound. When I'm done with this, I will activate that sound. So some of those kinds of things built in. One quick tip, there's a lot of quick and easy QR code creators. They're free and they're a tremendous resource in this realm because a lot of times a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video is worth like multiple millions. And so if you can do a quick little video of what that yes may look like, the range of yeses, go out there, do your video, put it in Dropbox, copy your URL, so the web address of that, go to one of those free QR code creators and you insert that URL, and then you can print that into your communication book. Any caregiver that comes along can hover their device, their phone over the QR code and see a little video of what that looks like for that user. So just a great way to use that technology that's out there.
We have one more question and then we're probably going to have to wrap it up since we're a few minutes over. So the last question is, should the communication partner always be trained to use the device to communicate with the AAC user, no matter if it's high tech or low tech?
My answer is yes. Not only, I can't say enough about this as a practitioner. I have always, and even before I worked here and I did evaluations with lots of systems, I use any system I'm recommending myself. For me, I use it 24 hours because I'm kind of a geek in that realm. Do not use my voice. This is crucial because it slows down your communication. It teaches you what all is going into their communication efforts, and it helps you find gaps in the system, and it makes it a really valid way to communicate with that individual. And it is providing a beautiful model for them. I personally think everyone should be using the communication partner system. Like you saw in our last video, this little guy was using dad's neuronode sensors to talk back to him. That's super important. I love that you brought that up, and a great question / prompt. I think definitely use the individual's communication system.
Good. All right. Well, Jill, thank you for such great information. And again, Franklin and Isaac, thank you for allowing us. Jill has her contact information on the screen, and I know Franklin wanted to wrap up with a few words as well.
So thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank everyone who was in attendance this evening for being at our webinar. So we appreciate everyone's time. And we hope, as with all of our webinars, that this was an informative session. I certainly found it to be a very informative session. And so I want to thank our presenter this evening, Jill, and thank you, Kristen, for your moderating efforts. It was a fascinating discussion, and you're both very dynamic speakers, so you guys are welcome back anytime. And thank you, of course, to Control Bionics. We appreciate your support of Isaac, your support of Isaac Connect, AAC Awareness Month, and of course, our ongoing support of the organization as we move forward to present Isaac Cancun next year, July 31st to August 5th, 2022. So on behalf of our friends at Control Bionics and on behalf of Isaac, I will wish everyone a great evening, morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Have a great day. Have a great rest of the week, and take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
It's Franklin.